My name is Claire Whitfield. I am 34 years old, and by the time my sister raised her wine glass at Thanksgiving dinner, I already knew she was about to turn me into the evening's entertainment. "You're already 34 and still single?" she said, loud enough for every cousin-in-law and family friend at the table to hear. Must be tough spending the holidays alone. The laughter came fast. My mother laughed too, then waved a hand as if the humiliation vanished the moment she called it harmless. "She's just teasing." I set my glass down. "Don't worry about me," I said. "I've been married for a long time." My mother froze mid-toast. My sister's smile collapsed. My father stared at me like he'd missed an entire chapter of his own family's life. Someone asked who my husband was. I looked at the glossy redevelopment proposal sitting beside my mother's plate, the one my family had spent 6 months preparing for a private investor they believed could save their failing business. "You already know his names," I said. "You've been begging for a meeting with him since June." No one laughed then. My sister reached for the proposal, but I put my hand on it first. There was something else they didn't know. That document contained my work, my credentials, and a signature I had never authorized. By the end of that night, my family would learn who I had married, why I had kept it from them, and what their favorite daughter had risked to make herself look successful. Before I tell you what my husband said and what happened after I walked out, tell me, what time is it, where you're watching this from, and how far away are you? I want to see how far this story travels tonight. My family owned Whitfield & Voss Heritage Works, a 3-generation Charleston, South Carolina company that restored theaters, libraries, and old civic buildings up and down the Lowcountry. By that Thanksgiving, the business still looked prestigious in photographs, but behind the polished brochures were overdue invoices, expensive loans, and a leadership team that preferred appearances over hard truths. My father, Walter Whitfield, understood historic construction but avoided confrontation at almost any cost. My mother, Diane, ran client relations and treated every family problem like a public relations crisis to be managed. My older sister, Renee Whitfield Cross, was creative director, the golden child who could turn charm into authority even when someone else had done the actual work. I grew up as the dependable daughter, the one who checked the numbers and solved emergencies, then got forgotten the moment the crisis passed. I never joined the family company. I became an architectural acoustics consultant, the specialist design teams hire when a concert hall looks stunning but sounds terrible, when a courtroom carries whispers 40 feet, or a restored train station turns every announcement into an echo. My work combined math, material science, field testing, and long nights inside empty buildings, listening for flaws no one else could hear. My mother called it sound decorating. Renee told people I adjust staples for a living. They mocked the profession right up until they needed my contacts, my reports, or an introduction to a theater board. When I helped, Renee described me publicly as someone supporting her vision. When I said no to unpaid work, my mother reminded me that family loyalty shouldn't come with conditions. I met Nathan Cole 3 years earlier, during the restoration of the Ash Grove Radio Theater, an abandoned 1930s broadcast house just outside Savannah. Nathan was a structural engineer and founder of Cole Civic Renewal, a redevelopment firm known for saving projects everyone else had written off. Our first real conversation was an argument about whether the original plaster ceiling could survive my acoustic plan. He came back the next morning with revised calculations and coffee. I came back with a test model proving we'd both been partly wrong. That became our rhythm. Challenge, evidence, adjustment, respect. I told my family almost nothing about him, because they treated private information like shared property. Renee had once gone through messages on my unlocked phone and repeated details of a breakup at Christmas dinner the following year. My mother defended her with the same words she used at every holiday. "She's just teasing." Another time, my mother invited a man I was dating to a company fundraiser without asking me, seated him beside a donor's daughter, and spent the whole night praising how well matched they looked together. When I objected, I was told I was being too sensitive. Those moments taught me something important. People who mock your boundaries are usually the first ones to resent you once those boundaries become real. Nathan understood, because he'd learned something similar. He kept his home life separate from business ever since a former partner had weaponized personal gossip during a municipal deal. Years earlier, we dated quietly, cooked late dinners after site visits, and spent Sunday mornings walking through salvage warehouses, looking for reclaimed wood and old ironwork. He met my closest friend, Priya. I met his younger sister, Hannah. Neither of us demanded a performance from the other. 16 months before that Thanksgiving, we got married in the reading room of a small municipal archive he'd helped restore. 9 guests, lemon cake from a bakery, 2 blocks from his office, and 0 family politics. I wore my ring on a chain during field inspections, because metal jewelry isn't safe around some of my testing equipment. Over time, the chain just became a habit, and my family never noticed a thing. I had thought about telling them. Each attempt died beneath another joke about women marrying late, another demand for free consulting work, or another reminder that Renee's milestone simply mattered more than mine. Nathan never pressured me either way. Tell them when disclosure feels safer than silence, he told me once. By that Thanksgiving, disclosure didn't feel safe, it felt necessary, because Whitfield and Voss had begun chasing the Palmetto Exchange, an old freight terminal slated to become a market hall, rehearsal complex, and vocational campus. Cole Civic Renewal was the only serious investor still weighing the project. My family had no idea Nathan was my husband. They also had no idea I had already seen their investor proposal and recognized entire pages of my own confidential analysis sitting inside it. After my announcement, the room stayed silent, long enough for me to hear ice shifting in someone's glass. A cousin at the far end of the table slowly lowered his phone, probably realizing the family joke he'd been filming had just turned into something else entirely. My sister recovered first. "Very dramatic, Claire," she said, forcing a laugh nobody joined. "Who is he?" My mother lowered her champagne but stayed frozen mid-toast. My father looked from me to the gold lettering on the proposal beside his plate. Cole Civic Renewal, Palmetto Exchange Partnership Review. "Nathan Cole," I said. "We've been married 16 months. My sister's husband, Derek." Stopped chewing. Renee's fingers tightened around her glass stem. "That's not possible," she said. I unlocked my phone, found the wedding photo I kept in a private album, and set it in the center of the table. Nathan and I stood inside the reading room of that restored archive. Afternoon light crossing the old oak floor behind us. He wore a charcoal suit with no tie. I wore a simple ivory dress, and the expression of someone who had finally made a choice without waiting for her family's approval. 9 people had been there that day. None of them shared my last name. My father picked up the phone carefully, like the image might vanish if he touched it too fast. My mother leaned in, her face moving through disbelief, hurt, quiet calculation, and finally recognition. My sister barely looked at the photo at all. Her eyes went straight to the proposal under my hand. "Does he know about the Palmetto project?" she asked. Not, "Are you happy?" Not, "Why didn't you tell us?" The first question out of her mouth was about the deal. "He knows exactly what your company submitted," I said. "What have you told him about us? That should worry you far less than what you told him about me." I opened the proposal to page 14. The acoustic feasibility summary was mine. So were the reverberation projections, the vibration diagrams, and the material schedule for the terminal's proposed performance hall. I had prepared the original report 2 years earlier for a nonprofit arts coalition, considering a lease inside that same building. The project died when a grant fell through, but the research stayed protected under my consulting agreement, every page marked confidential. I had shared a preliminary copy with my father, after he asked whether the building could realistically host live performances without a full rebuild. He'd promised he only wanted the technical risk. Now my work had been folded straight into Whitfield and Voss's investor package, with the copyright footer stripped out. My name appeared under a heading that read, Senior Technical Partner, claiming I had agreed to serve as the company's lead acoustics advisor for the entire redevelopment. I had never agreed to anything. Beneath it sat a digital signature, close enough to mine, to fool anyone flipping fast through 200 pages. My father pulled the proposal toward himself. "Diane, what is this?" My mother didn't answer him. She looked straight at my sister instead. Derek wiped his mouth and said he'd been assured I had reviewed and approved the whole package. "It was a working draft," Renee said. Nothing was final. You submitted it to an investment committee, I said. That makes it a lot more than a draft. Claire has helped the company before, my mother told the table, as if past generosity bought permanent access to my name. She sent us recommendations, reviewed materials, made introductions. We had every reason to believe she'd support this. Helping you before isn't lifelong consent, I said, and support isn't a forged signature. My mother reached across the table for the proposal, but I pulled it back. Whatever happened, we can fix it privately, she said. There's no reason your husband should make a multi-million-dollar decision over a disagreement between sisters. Her hypocrisy was almost elegant. Less than 5 minutes earlier, she'd laughed while I was called a lonely 34-year-old woman. Now my real marriage had become a corporate asset I'd selfishly failed to disclose. Nathan isn't walking away because I'm upset, I said. Cole Civic's compliance team found inconsistencies before anyone even knew I was connected to him personally. My father frowned. What inconsistencies? Revenue projections that don't match your tax filings. Subcontractor commitment letters from firms that deny ever issuing them. A financing statement listing personal guarantors who never agreed to guarantee anything. And my forged signature. Derek's face changed the moment I said, guarantors. He asked which names were listed. Renee told him this wasn't the time. Apparently Thanksgiving dinner is the time to discuss my marriage, he said, but not the paperwork attached to our house. My phone buzzed. Nathan was calling because he knew I'd planned to confront them and had asked me to text once I was safe. You okay? I'm fine, I said. They know we're married. They know about the proposal too. My mother instantly switched into the polished voice she used with donors. Nathan, this is Diane Whitfield. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Nathan heard the unspoken question in my silence. Put me on speaker, he said. I did. Mr. Cole, my mother began. Rennie may have moved too quickly, but Claire has contributed informally for years. There was no intention to mislead anyone. A written representation was backed by falsified documentation, Nathan said evenly. That isn't informal contribution, and it isn't a misunderstanding. Renee leaned toward the phone. Claire isn't objective when it comes to me. My wife's feelings didn't create the discrepancies in your submission, Nathan said. Her integrity is the reason one of them got caught, before it created bigger legal exposure for everyone. The word wife landed harder than the wedding photo had. It made our marriage real in a way my family couldn't wave off as another performance. My mother closed her eyes briefly. My father looked at my ringless hand, then noticed the thin chain at my collar. Renee's face hardened. Are you saying Cole Civic is rejecting the proposal? Our investment committee will issue formal notice after the holiday. Until then, neither Whitfield and Voss nor anyone acting on its behalf may use Claire's name, reports, credentials, diagrams, or implied participation anywhere. Preserve every draft and communication tied to this submission. Further questions go through counsel. Nathan, my mother said quickly, before you make a decision that could affect 40 people's jobs, maybe we could arrange a private family meeting. The employees are exactly why this has to go through proper review instead of family pressure, he answered. Claire, call me when you leave. I ended the call. No one spoke for several seconds. My mother stared at me like I had personally written every false number in that proposal. Claire, she finally said, lowering her voice, you have to fix this. Not I'm sorry. Not how could this have happened. Not we should never have laughed at you. Her instinct was the same one it had always been. Renee created the emergency, and I was expected to become the solution. I stood and reached for my coat. No, I said. For once, the person who caused the problem is going to carry it. My sister stood too. You cannot walk in here, reveal a secret husband, threaten the company, and leave like you're innocent. I turned to her. I didn't put Nathan's name in your proposal. You did. I didn't attach my signature to a lie. You did. And I didn't turn my marriage into a weapon tonight. You turned my supposed loneliness into entertainment. And the truth just happened to answer you. The room had gone quiet enough that even the people who'd laughed earlier wouldn't look at me. I opened the front door, but before stepping outside, I looked back at my mother. You told me she was just teasing. Maybe tomorrow you can explain which part was funny. Do you have a sibling who's ever done something like this to you? Tell me in comments. I want to know I'm not the only one. My mother followed me into the entry hall. You can't leave after dropping something like this. Your sister made a mistake. Families fix mistakes. Families also prevent them, I said. They don't laugh while one daughter humiliates another, then demand loyalty the second money's involved. For years, Renee's cruelty had been treated as a personality. Quirk the rest of us were responsible for absorbing. When she borrowed my things, I was told not to be possessive. When she repeated private details, I was told not to be secretive. Every boundary I set proved I was cold. Every boundary she crossed proved she was outgoing. The worst incident had happened 5 years earlier, when I redesigned the acoustics for a children's theater tucked beneath a highway overpass. Renee saw my presentation during a family visit. 3 months later, Whitfield & Voss entered a regional design award, using my diagrams as proof of its innovative methodology. My name scrubbed off entirely. I found out when the awards committee invited me to serve as a juror. My mother begged me not to report it, because public embarrassment could cost employees their jobs. Renee cried, called the images placeholders, and accused me of enjoying her humiliation. I agreed not to file a complaint. 2 weeks later, my mother told relatives I'd nearly destroyed the company over a formatting error. That was the moment I stopped confusing piece with repair. Nathan had known that whole history before we married. He'd watched Renee send me a 40-page bid package at midnight with the message, "You're the genius. Make this credible by morning." He never once told me to cut them off. He just asked, what would contact with them look like if guilt weren't making the rules? The answer turned out to be limited information, everything in writing, and no access to my marriage until they could learn to respect it. I didn't hide Nathan because he was important. I hid us because our marriage was the one part of my life they'd never been allowed to rename or borrow. My mother crossed her arms. "You excluded us from your wedding." Yes, the plain answer seemed to startle her. I'd invited people who could be happy for me, without turning the day into a negotiation. Behind the door, Renee was blaming Derek for approving the proposal. My father asked them to stop. My mother lowered her voice. Cole Civic was our last option. The bank gave us until February 1st to show new capital. If this deal disappears, we could lose the project and the showroom. Old habits nearly took over for half a second. I pictured reviewing the debt, calling Nathan, building a rescue plan. That was the role they'd always preferred for me. Invisible until competence became necessary. Did Renee know that deadline when she signed my name? My mother looked away. The door opened. My father stepped into the hall, holding a manila folder full of lender notices and a draft list of personal guarantors. My name was on it, listed as a family principal with substantial outside income, even though I never owned a single share of Whitfield & Voss. A sticky note beside it read, "Claire will come around once Nathan's committed." That was only planning, my mother said. My father pulled the folder away from her. "Diane, stop." Then he looked at me. I didn't approve this. I should have known. 3 days after Thanksgiving, Cole Civic formally ended negotiations. The letter cited material misrepresentation, unauthorized use of a consultant's credentials, and weak internal financial controls. It never mentioned our marriage. Nathan had insisted the records stay strictly professional, so no one could dismiss the decision as personal revenge. The facts were damning enough on their own. The city suspended Whitfield & Voss from the Palmetto bid. The bank refused to extend its deadline. Subcontractors started demanding overdue payment, and Derek's own father hired a lawyer after learning he'd invested money based on Renee's claim that the coal deal was essentially locked in. On January 4th, my mother showed up at my office with a binder labeled Family Continuity Plan. It proposed that Nathan buy 49% of Whitfield & Voss, absorb part of the debt, and let Renee stay on as president of creative operations. I would join the board, provide technical services for 5 years at a family rate, and publicly call the forged signature an administrative misunderstanding. It wasn't a rescue plan. It transferred all the risk to me and Nathan, while preserving power for the exact people who'd created the crisis. "You said you wanted accountability," my mother told me. "You can supervise Renee from the board." "I don't want to supervise her," I said. "I want her to be responsible for herself. She's your sister. She's also the executive who submitted false information." My mother's composure cracked. 40 people depend on this company. Your grandfather started it with 2 employees and a borrowed truck. I understood the employee risks better than she realized because I'd already reviewed the numbers with an independent restructuring attorney. Saving the workers didn't require preserving Whitfield family control. There's one structure I'd support, I said. Whitfield and Voss enters court-supervised restructuring. The showroom gets sold. Employees get priority for unpaid wages. The restoration division goes to a qualified buyer or a worker cooperative. Dad can stay on as a technical advisor. Renee resigns from management, issues a factual correction about my work, and repays legal costs tied to the false submission. You and Dad release any claim that I'm responsible for family debt. Cole Civic can bid through an open process, but I won't influence the price. You want to strip our name off our own company. I want the people who actually do the work to have a chance at keeping their jobs. This is punishment. No, punishment would be using my marriage to destroy you. I'm refusing to use it to protect you from choices you already made. After she left, I cried alone in the conference room. Doing the right thing didn't feel triumphant. It felt like admitting the family I wanted wasn't the family standing outside my office making demands. Nathan found me there and said my mother had called his office, claiming our marriage made me biased. His counsel had preserved the voicemail. Part of me still wants to fix payroll, I admitted. Kindness doesn't require handing control back to the same people, he said. Together we worked out a lawful alternative. Cole Civic wouldn't rescue Whitfield and Voss, but it would help finance a regional employee-owned restoration cooperative if the assets were sold transparently. Nathan recused himself from the internal vote entirely. I agreed to limited paid consulting only if the cooperative won through an open bidding process. No secret leverage, no family discount, no erased consequences. When Renee found out, she called. You're giving our company to strangers. The people in that cooperative have completed most of your projects for years. You know what I mean. Yes. They're strangers to you because they don't share our last name, even though you risked their jobs to protect yours. She started crying and admitted the Thanksgiving joke had been strategic. She'd heard I might be seeing someone important, but couldn't figure out who, and calling me single in front of everyone was meant to force a denial or a confession. You could have just asked if I was happy, I said. I didn't think you'd tell me. You were right. She asked whether resigning would make the investigation disappear. I told her the city review and the Cole notice were built on records, not on my mood. Before hanging up, she said, You have no idea what it's like to fail in front of everyone. You made me fail in front of everyone. Every time you turned my life into a joke, I replied. The difference is, I learned to keep living without needing to make someone else smaller. Whitfield and Voss filed for restructuring on January 12th. My father supported it after discovering that Renee and my mother had hidden 2 creditor notices from him. My mother called him disloyal, he said, pretending was no longer loyalty. It was the most honest sentence I'd ever heard him say. The city review found that Renee had submitted my altered signature from her own account and instructed a junior coordinator to strip my copyright footer off 2 diagrams. The coordinator had emails showing she'd questioned the order and been told I'd verbally cleared everything. Renee was barred from serving as a principal on municipal redevelopment contracts for 3 years. It didn't end her career, but it ended the version of it built on family protection and borrowed credibility. Derek moved out after learning. She'd also understated personal guarantees tied to the company. My mother told relatives that Nathan had engineered a hostile takeover because I held a childhood grudge. That story fell apart when Cole Civic declined to bid on the showroom at all and backed the employee cooperative instead. Low Country Restoration Partners bought the equipment, active contracts, and vehicles. 32 of 40 employees received offers. The rest got priority wage claims and placement help. The Whitfield name wasn't included anywhere. On the morning workers took the brass letters down off the building, my father asked me to meet him across the street. He handed me a signed declaration that I had never been an owner, guarantor, or authorized representative of the company. He also gave me a personal letter apologizing for every time he'd let my mother and Renee turn me into a resource, for pressuring me to overlook the old award submission, and for mistaking my silence for consent. I don't expect forgiveness on a schedule, he said. I just wanted the truth written down somewhere, other than my own head. It was the first apology from anyone in my family that came with no instructions attached for me to follow. I hugged him, but I didn't tell him everything was fine, because it wasn't yet. We started meeting for breakfast once a month. He took a paid advisory role with Low Country, and worked without carrying the family name as authority, for the first time in his life. My mother stayed quiet for 4 months, then showed up at a lecture where I was speaking about acoustic accessibility in public buildings. Afterward, she waited until the room emptied. "I watched you for 40 minutes, she said. "I realized I don't actually know what you do. You could learn," I said. She nodded. "I also realized the way we talked about you made it easier not to notice you." That sentence mattered, because it finally placed the responsibility on the behavior that had made ignoring me so convenient for everyone. If you've ever had a parent finally say the quiet part out loud, you know exactly how strange that moment feels. "She asked to meet Nathan as my husband, instead of as an investor," I said. "Not yet." She looked hurt but accepted it. Boundaries only become real when they survive someone else's disappointment. Renee's first genuine apology came later than everyone else's. She sent a correction to the Regional Preservation Association, the city, Low Country, my attorney, and every former director. Plain language, no misunderstanding, no placeholder, no shared family material. She admitted using my diagrams without permission, in both the old design award and the Palmetto proposal. Then she wrote to me privately. "I kept thinking that if people saw you as lonely, they'd stop seeing me as less capable. I was wrong about what that did to you, and what it made me. I don't expect you to trust me." I acknowledged the correction through my attorney. An apology can mean something without buying immediate access back. Months later, I agreed to one conversation with Renee in a therapist's office. She described taking an ethics course, accepting contract work outside historic development, and finally confronting how often she'd converted envy into entitlement. "Did you hide the marriage because you hated me?" she asked. "No," I said. "I hid it because I loved my life enough to protect it." She cried quietly. I didn't rescue her from the feeling, and I didn't punish her with it either. I just let the truth sit in the room between us. Nathan and my mother finally met that summer. She apologized for pulling him into the family chaos. He answered gently, "It wasn't confusion. Claire was clear. You just didn't like the boundary." My mother looked at me, then nodded. That's true. It was a small admission, but it was one she'd been completely incapable of making at Thanksgiving. 1 year after that dinner, Nathan and I hosted 9 people in the archive reading room where we'd gotten married. Priya brought the same lemon cake. Hannah came with her sons. My father spent 20 minutes explaining the building's steel trusses to anyone who'd stand still long enough. My mother joined us for dessert, after asking whether the invitation actually included her. It did. Renee wasn't there. We'd reached occasional phone calls, not holidays, and both of us understood that trust gets built through repetition, not declared just because a year had gone by on a calendar. Low Country Restoration Partners finished its first profitable quarter. The craftspeople who'd kept Whitfield and Voss running for years now owned shares in the company that replaced it. My father served as a paid advisor with no voting control. The Palmetto contract went to another firm, but Low Country won a smaller library restoration entirely on its own merit. No family name opened that door, the work did. Renee finished the city's ethics requirements and took a job coordinating vendor logistics for a trade show company. Smaller title, smaller salary, but the work was measurable. In therapy, she admitted that starting over embarrassed her, until she noticed something unfamiliar. When a project succeeded, she knew exactly which part of it belonged to her. My mother changed the slowest and the most honestly. When relatives asked why they'd never known about my wedding, she first called me secretive. After I corrected her, she started saying, Claire didn't feel safe telling us. Eventually that became, we gave her reasons not to. Real accountability was never one dramatic apology. It was telling the truth, even when the old, easier story made her look better. My acoustic accessibility framework became part of a national design guide, and I was chosen to lead the sound strategy for a science museum, being built inside a former aircraft hangar outside Charleston. At the launch event, an interviewer asked Nathan how it felt to be married to someone getting so much attention. He smiled. Normal. I was impressed by her before she knew my middle name. Then he stepped aside so the next question came to me. He could stand beside me without ever needing to stand in front of me. People sometimes ask if revealing my marriage was revenge. It wasn't. I didn't marry Nathan to surprise my family. I didn't alter my own signature, strip copyright marks, hide creditor notices, or force Renee to mock me at a dinner table. I told the truth at the exact moment. They expected me to absorb another lie about myself. Then I refused to spend my marriage, my expertise, or my reputation, shielding them from the consequences of their own choices. The family company disappeared, but the employees' work survived. My father lost authority and recovered integrity. My mother lost the social story she'd been protecting and started learning how to relate to me without managing appearances. Renee lost her status and the certainty that someone else would always clean up after her. And I lost the fantasy that one perfect explanation could ever transform people who'd benefited for years from misunderstanding me. On the anniversary of that Thanksgiving dinner, my mother sent me a message. I laughed, because stopping Renee would have meant admitting I encouraged the way she treated you. You deserved a mother who protected your dignity before she needed your help. I'm sorry. I thanked her for saying it plainly, and told her trust would still take time. It wasn't a grand reunion. It was a door opened only as wide as I chose to open it. That evening, I wore my wedding ring on my hand instead of the chain around my neck. My father noticed first. My mother noticed second, and smiled without turning it into a speech. Nathan touched my fingers under the table. I used to believe family peace meant preventing discomfort. Now I know peace built on one person's silence is really just convenience for everyone else. Love doesn't require unlimited access. Forgiveness doesn't erase accountability. And a joke that keeps landing on the same wound isn't humor. It's a test of how much disrespect the room is willing to permit. When I remember my sister asking whether it was hard spending the holidays alone, I don't remember the laughter first anymore. I remember the quiet after I set down my glass. I've been married for a long time, I told them. But what I was really telling them was this. I've had a full life for a long time. You simply never looked closely enough to see it. So if someone you love keeps shrinking your life down into a joke, ask yourself, are you protecting the relationship, or just the version of you that makes the relationship easy for them? Sometimes the strongest kind of revenge is refusing to stay available for disrespect, building a life no one gets to borrow without permission, and letting the truth collect every consequence you were once expected to prevent. If this story hit home for you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Shadow Drama Stories drops a new story like this every week, and I promise you'll want to be here for the next one. All situations are fictional and created only for entertainment and reflection. We hope it reminds you that your peace isn't a reward. Other people get to approve. It's a right you're allowed to protect. Anyone who benefits from your pain may never understand your healing, but you can still choose it anyway.